I decided to visit my husband at his job as a CEO. At the entrance, there was a sign that said authorized personnel only. When I told the guard I was the CEO's wife, he laughed and said, "Ma'am, I see his wife every day. There she is coming out right now." So I decided to play along. The security guard at Bramwell Industries laughed when I told him I was Marcus's wife. "Ma'am, I see his wife here every day. There she is right now, actually." He pointed toward the glass doors. A woman in a fitted cream blazer was walking through the lobby, late 30s, heels clicking with purpose, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm like she owned the building. The kind of woman who looked like she'd never once been told no. "Ms. Whitfield," the guard called out. "Mr. Bramwell's still wrapping up the 2 o'clock. Should be maybe 10 more minutes." The woman, according to the badge clipped to her blazer, nodded without breaking stride and headed toward the elevator bank. She hadn't noticed me. I was standing near the security desk holding a paper bag from Marcus's favorite deli, the one with the pastrami he always ordered on Fridays. My heart did something strange in my chest. Not racing. Just stopping and starting, like an engine that couldn't decide if it wanted to turn over. 22 years. I had been married to Marcus for 22 years, and apparently, he had another wife at the office. Ms. Whitfield pressed the elevator button, glanced at her phone, didn't look up again. Every instinct in me wanted to walk over there and ask her exactly what she thought she was doing, letting a security guard call her Marcus's wife like it was something everybody already knew. Like I was the only person in this building who hadn't gotten the memo. But something held me still. Maybe it was the guard's tone. So easy. So certain. Not a rumor, not a guess. A fact he recited the way you'd recite the time. "You know," I said, keeping my voice level, "I think I've got the wrong building. I'm looking for Avern Consulting, not Bramwell." The guard frowned. "You said you were Mrs. Bramwell." I said I was a friend of the family. Diane's my name. Must have crossed my wires. I forced a small laugh. "Long day." I set the deli bag on the security desk. "Could you make sure he gets this? Just tell him Diane dropped it off." The guard shrugged. "Sure thing." I walked out before my legs could decide to stop working properly. I had married Marcus in the spring of 2002. We met when we were both 24, me finishing my CPA licensing, him just starting as a junior analyst at a firm 3 floors below where his office sits today. He was ambitious in a way that used to make me proud, the kind of man who mapped out 5-year plans and actually followed through on them. I was the steady one. The one who kept the household running, who handled our taxes every April without being asked twice, who made sure the mortgage cleared and the retirement contributions went in before anything else did. Marcus used to tell people I was the reason he could take risks, that because I held everything together at home, he could gamble on his career without ever worrying the floor would fall out from under him. He climbed fast. Regional director at 31. Vice president at 36. CEO of Bramwell Industries, a logistics and supply chain company, at 44. He'd taken it from a company barely staying solvent to a 9-figure operation in under a decade. I was proud of him. God, I was proud of him. I'd sat through every late dinner eaten alone, every canceled anniversary moved to next weekend, every business trip that turned into 2. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You hold the door open behind them so they can run. We had 2 children, both grown now, both out of the house. Marcus used to say our kids turning out steady and grounded was proof the foundation we'd built together actually worked. I believed that. I had believed a lot of things. Now I was sitting in my car in the Bramwell Industries parking garage, hands wrapped around the steering wheel, trying to make sense of what I'd just watched happen in that lobby. Renee Whitfield. I recognized the name once I let myself think it through. Director of Business Development, promoted 18 months ago. I'd met her exactly once, at the company holiday party. Sharp, well-spoken. Marcus had introduced her as one of the best hires we've made in years, and then spent 20 minutes of the party talking strategy with her while I made small talk with the caterers. I'd thought nothing of it. Why would I have? I trusted my husband, but the guard hadn't said colleague. He hadn't said assistant. He'd said wife. Every single day. I didn't drive home right away. I couldn't face the house yet, the one I'd spent the morning cleaning, The one where I'd defrosted the short ribs Marcus liked for Sunday dinner. The one where I'd hidden 2 tickets to a Broadway tour coming through in the fall, a surprise for our anniversary next month. Instead, I pulled into a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office and sat in a corner booth with a coffee I never touched. My phone buzzed at 6:52 p.m. Marcus. Running late again. Big presentation prep. Don't wait up. Love you. I stared at those 4 words for a long time. Love you. Did he? Or was I something else entirely? The safety net. The name on the mortgage. The woman who kept the lights on so he could shine somewhere else. I typed and deleted a dozen replies before settling on, okay, there's short ribs in the fridge. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. You're the best, see you tonight. I set the phone face down on the table and made myself breathe. Marcus came home at 11:40 p.m. I was on the couch pretending to read, though I'd been staring at the same page for almost 3 hours. Hey, he said, setting his bag by the door, tie already loosened, collar unbuttoned. How was your day? I asked. My voice came out steady. That surprised me. Brutal. Back to back all afternoon. Then the board deck ran long. Renee and I were stuck in the conference room until past 9 going over the Q3 numbers. He headed for the kitchen. You said short ribs? In the fridge. I listened to him move through our kitchen, the microwave humming, the familiar sounds of a man existing in a house that no longer felt entirely like ours. I actually stopped by your office today, I said, keeping my tone light. Brought you lunch from Camden's. The pastrami you like. He paused just barely a half second most people wouldn't have caught. But I had been married to him for 22 years. I caught it. You did? I never got it. I gave it to the front desk. Figured they'd pass it along. Huh. Weird, nobody mentioned it. Busy day. He was lying beautifully. Not a single crack. How's Renee? I asked. Great. Sharpest hire we've made in years. We're completely in sync on where the company's headed. In sync. I filed that phrase away like evidence. That's good, I said. Important to work well with your team. Absolutely. He smiled at me then, the same smile I'd fallen for at 24. Thanks for trying to bring lunch, though. That was sweet. Anytime, I said, and I meant it in a way that had nothing left to do with kindness. We sat there, him eating short ribs, me pretending to read, 2 people performing a marriage for an audience of no one. I waited until Marcus was asleep. He always went down heavy. Years of running on stress and adrenaline had trained his body to shut off completely the second his head hit the pillow. By midnight, he was out cold. I got up quietly and walked down the hall to his study. The door was never locked. Why would it be? I was his wife. He trusted me. His laptop sat closed on the desk, but not locked. I knew his password. Had known it for years. It was our wedding date. I opened it, my hands trembling slightly, feeling like an intruder in my own home. His email was already open, thousands of unread messages stacked in the inbox. I didn't know where to start, so I opened his calendar instead. At first glance, everything looked ordinary. Board calls, quarterly reviews, client dinners. But the longer I scrolled, the more a pattern started surfacing underneath the surface. Dinner with our 7 p.m. Luca's. That entry was from 2 weeks ago. Luca's was a candlelit place downtown, the kind with a pianist and tables set too close for 2 people discussing spreadsheets. Not the kind of place you take a colleague to talk logistics software. Weekend retreat, Cedar Point Lodge, booked for last month. I looked up the lodge's website. $430 a night for a suite. Marcus had told me it was an executive leadership offsite. I pulled his corporate card statement. Found the charge. 1 room. Not 2 rooms split for 2 attendees. 1 room, 2 people. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I kept scrolling. More dinners. More overnight trips. A pattern stretching back nearly 2 years. Every single one of them coded in language that could be explained away if anyone ever asked. Strategy session. Client relations. Team alignment. Except Renee's name sat beside every entry, every single time. I closed the laptop and walked to our bedroom doorway. Marcus was sleeping on his side, one arm folded under the pillow, face slack and peaceful. I had trusted this man completely. Never once questioned where he was or who he was with. And he had been lying to me for 2 years, maybe longer. The next morning I called in sick to the firm. First time in 9 years. I was a senior accountant at Holloway & Voss, a mid-sized practice downtown, the kind of stable, unglamorous career that pays every bill on time but never comes up at dinner parties. Marcus made nearly triple what I made. I had never resented it. His success had always felt like our success. That's what I told myself, anyway. After he left for work, kissing my forehead, telling me to rest and drink fluids, I started digging in earnest. I went through every drawer in his study, every folder in his filing cabinet, every box on the top shelf of his closet. In the back of a drawer, underneath a stack of old cufflinks he never wore anymore, I found a key. Plain, silver, no label. Attached to the ring was a small tag with an address printed on it. Coppaline Apartments, Unit 512. Coppaline was a luxury high-rise in the Arts District. I'd driven past it 100 times, floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of building where a one-bedroom started well north of $2,000 a month. I took that key and drove there before I could talk myself out of it. The parking garage had spots marked by unit number. Space 512 had a silver Audi sedan parked in it. Renee Whitfield's car. I recognized it from the office lot. My hands were shaking as I rode the elevator up. Found Unit 512. The key slid into the lock and turned like it had done it 100 times before. The door opened. Inside was not a temporary rental. It was a home. Hardwood floors, tasteful modern furniture, fresh flowers sitting on the coffee table like someone lived there and loved it. The air smelled like Marcus's cologne mixed with something floral I didn't recognize. Photos sat on the mantel, the two of them at a lake house at a rooftop bar, hiking some trail with mountains behind them. In every single photo, Marcus wasn't wearing his wedding ring. I moved through that apartment like I was underwater. The kitchen had 2 sets of dishes stacked in the cabinet. 2 coffee mugs drying by the sink, his and hers, like a wedding gift someone had actually picked out for them. The bedroom is where it stopped being bearable. A king bed with linens I didn't recognize. Marcus's suits hanging in the closet beside Renee's dresses, his shoes lined up next to hers like they had been sharing a life for a long time. On the dresser sat a folder labeled, in Marcus's handwriting, next chapter. I opened it with fingers that didn't feel like mine anymore. Real estate listings. Homes in 3 different suburbs, all in the $700,000 to $900,000 range, all circled, all annotated in the margins. Good school district. Close to Renee's parents. Love the natural light in the kitchen. Underneath the listings sat travel brochures. Santorini, Kyoto, Queenstown. Destinations that read like a honeymoon list, because that's exactly what they were. And underneath all of that, legal paperwork. Consultation summaries from 3 different divorce attorneys. The earliest one dated 14 months back. Marcus had been shopping for representation over a year ago. The notes were clinical, almost cold. Frame as irreconcilable differences. Cite lack of shared ambition. Document pattern of emotional distance and unwillingness to engage with career priorities. Pages of it. Every ordinary friction point in a 22-year marriage reframed as a case file against me. The time I'd asked him to skip a work dinner for our son's graduation. The time I hadn't wanted to talk shop over dinner because I'd had a hard day myself. Filed away as evidence of a wife who couldn't keep up. The most recent entry was dated 3 weeks earlier. Timeline. File by January. Finalized by summer. Move forward with R by fall. He had it mapped out. Every detail planned like a merger. My replacement was already half living with him. Their future house was already picked out on paper. I was simply the line item still standing in the way of the plan going final. I photographed every page, every document, every listing, every legal note. Then I sat down on their couch, in their apartment, inside the secret architecture of a life my husband had been quietly building without me, and I tried to absorb the fact that 22 years of marriage had been a lie for at least the last 2 of them. I drove home with no real destination in mind. Just drove. My phone rang at 4:10 p.m. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 4:35. Then a text. Where are you? Feeling any better? I didn't answer. Around 6, I finally pulled into a lot and let myself listen to the voicemails he'd left. Hey, just checking in. Hope you're feeling better. Call me back. Then a little more urgent. Diane, I'm getting worried. You're not answering. Are you okay? I'm about to start calling hospitals. Please call me. The concern in his voice sounded so real. He was good. Genuinely good at this. I called him back. Oh, thank God. He answered immediately. Where have you been? I was starting to panic. Just needed to clear my head.
Ai fine.
You scared me half to death. Are you coming home? Home. What a strange word to use for a place he'd apparently already stopped living in every way that mattered. Yeah, I said. I'll be there soon. Good. I'll grab Ty on the way. Your favorite. My favorite. He still remembered the small things. Still performed the role of a man who paid attention. Sounds good, I said. Love you, he said. You too, I answered, and hung up before he could hear my voice break. That night we ate Thai food at our own dining table like nothing in the world had shifted. Marcus told me about his day, some client escalation, a difficult board member pushing back on the quarterly numbers, the usual noise of running a company. I nodded in the right places, asked the right follow-up questions, played the part of the supportive wife perfectly, all while knowing that somewhere in the next few months, he planned to file paperwork ending our marriage and start a new one with a woman 12 years younger than me. After dinner, he suggested a movie. We settled onto the couch, his arm around my shoulders, exactly the way we'd sat 1,000 nights before. Except now I could smell that faint floral trace still clinging to the collar of his shirt, and I knew exactly where he'd been earlier that week, living an entire second life in an apartment with someone else's coffee mugs. You okay? He asked partway through the movie. You seem distant. Distant. That word again. Straight out of his notes. Already part of the file he was building against me. I'm fine, I said. Just tired. Okay. He squeezed my hand. Let me know if you need anything. I will, I thought. I need everything you've spent 2 years trying to take from me back. We finished the movie, went to bed. He fell asleep within minutes, curled on his side, breathing slow and even. I lay awake until nearly 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling fan turning in slow circles, mapping out what came next. The following morning I called in sick again. Marcus left for the office at 7:15, kissing my forehead, telling me to rest. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I was back in his study. 22 years as an accountant had taught me exactly how to read a set of numbers for what they were actually saying, not what someone wanted them to say. And now that I knew what to look for, the pattern in front of me stopped being subtle. Our joint checking account showed steady deposits from both our paychecks. Mine just over $5,000 a month after taxes. Marcus's closer to $14,000. Our combined expenses, mortgage, utilities, groceries, insurance, came to roughly $7,000 a month. By simple math, we should have been putting away over $100,000 a year. Our actual savings account held $61,000 total after 22 years of marriage and the last several years at his executive salary. Something had been bleeding money out of our life for a long time, and I finally understood where. I pulled up the credit card Marcus called his business expense card, the one he said got reimbursed by the company every quarter. Coppaline Apartments, $3,100 a month, running for over 2 years. That alone came to nearly $80,000. Furniture charges from 3 different high-end retailers totaling almost $20,000. Travel charges pushing past $40,000 across a dozen different trips I'd never heard about. Restaurant charges at places I'd never once been taken to in over 2 decades of marriage. He had been funding an entire second life with money that should have belonged to both of us. While I drove a car with 130,000 miles on it and packed my own lunch every single day, he had been furnishing an apartment for the woman he planned to replace me with, using money I had helped earn. I documented all of it, downloaded 2 years of statements, screenshotted every charge, built a folder with dates lined up like a ledger. Then, because the accountant in me doesn't know how to stop once it starts pulling a thread, I looked past our personal finances and into the company itself. Bramall Industries filed quarterly reports that were technically public. I'd read them before, mostly out of pride, watching my husband's name at the top of a growing company. This time I read them differently. I read them the way I'd been trained to read anything, looking for the story, hiding underneath the numbers. What I found wasn't just an affair anymore. Marcus had been quietly restructuring departments without full board sign-off, shifting budget and headcount into Renee's division, positioning her for a chief operating officer role that didn't officially exist yet on the org chart. He was building her a ladder straight to the top of the company while making it look, on paper, like sound strategic planning. That wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. That was a betrayal of every shareholder who trusted him to run that company with integrity instead of personal interest. I took screenshots of everything, built a timeline, organized it into a single folder that told the whole story from start to finish, personal and professional both. Then I did something I never imagined myself capable of doing. I called the chairman of the Bramall Industries board. I had met Walter Sinclair exactly twice, both times at company holiday parties, both times for less than 5 minutes of polite small talk. Retired investment banker, late 60s, the kind of man who still wore cufflinks to casual dinners. "Diane," he said when he picked up, sounding surprised. "Is everything all right? Is Marcus okay?" "He's fine," I said, keeping my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm actually calling about some concerns regarding the company." A pause. "What kind of concerns?" "The kind involving unauthorized restructuring and misuse of corporate resources." "Do you have time to meet today?" Another pause, longer this time. "I can be at your house within the hour." Walter arrived just after 2, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. I offered him coffee. He accepted, though I don't think either of us actually drank it. We sat in the living room where Marcus and I had hosted anniversary dinners and family holidays for over 2 decades, a room that had apparently only ever been a backdrop for someone else's second life. I opened my laptop and walked him through everything. The apartment, the photos, the divorce planning documents, the corporate restructuring, budget by budget, transfer by transfer. His expression darkened with every new file. "My God," he muttered when I pulled up the department reallocations. "She's been given authority she was never formally granted. Redirected capital that should have gone through committee approval. Why would he do that?" I asked, though I already knew. I pulled up the apartment photos. Walter's jaw tightened visibly. "They're not just having an affair," I said. "They're living together part-time. He's planning to divorce me and marry her. And he's been quietly building her a path to run this company." "That's an enormous conflict of interest," Walter said. "He has a fiduciary duty to this board and to every shareholder in this company." He paused, ran a hand through his hair. "Do you have copies of all of this?" "Everything's on this drive," I said, handing him the small black flash drive I'd prepared that morning. "Financial records, corporate filings, photographs, timeline, all of it." "I need to call an emergency board session," Walter said, standing. "Diane, I'm sorry for what he's put you through personally. But I also need to thank you. If this had continued unchecked, the damage to this company could have been catastrophic." "I'm not doing this out of revenge," I told him, though that wasn't entirely true. "I'm doing it because it's the truth, and I'm done pretending I haven't seen it." Walter shook my hand and left. And for the first time in 3 days, I sat alone in my living room and simply breathed. Marcus came home at 6:20 that evening, earlier than usual. One look at his face told me everything I needed to know. Walter had already made his calls. "We need to talk," he said, setting his bag down slower than usual, his voice already stripped of its normal ease. "I got a call from Walter. He said there's some kind of emergency board meeting called for tomorrow morning. Do you know anything about that?" I looked at him for a long moment before I answered. 22 years, and I had never once looked at his face and felt like I was looking at a stranger. Now I couldn't stop seeing it. "I do," I said, "because I'm the one who called him." The color left his face slowly, like watching a light dim instead of switch off. "What are you talking about?" "I know about Renee," I said. "I know about Copperline. I know about the folder on her dresser with the school districts circled and the honeymoon destinations picked out. I know about the divorce attorneys you consulted 14 months ago. And I know exactly how much of our money went into building that apartment while I was driving a car with a hole rusting through the floor panel. He didn't try to deny it. That was almost the worst part. 22 years of marriage, and in the end, he didn't even bother fighting for the lie. He sat down heavily in the armchair across from me, elbows on his knees, and put his face in his hands. Diane, I can explain you can't, I said, and my voice didn't shake the way I expected it to. There's nothing left to explain. I've seen the timeline. File by January, finalized by summer, move forward with her by fall. You had an entire plan for replacing me, and the only thing you never planned for was me finding out before you were ready. It wasn't supposed to happen like this, he said quietly. None of it was supposed to be cruel. Things changed between us. I fell into something I didn't mean to fall into. You didn't fall, I said. You built an apartment. You furnished a closet. You had legal consultations. Falling doesn't come with a real estate folder labeled next chapter. He didn't have an answer for that. The board meeting happened the next morning at 9. I wasn't in that room, but Walter called me himself just past noon to tell me what unfolded. Marcus was placed on immediate administrative leave pending a full internal investigation into the unauthorized restructuring and the misallocation of capital toward Renee's division. Renee was placed on leave as well. The board's outside counsel had already been looped in, and, depending on what the audit revealed, there was real discussion of this moving beyond an internal matter entirely. Marcus's 5-year plan collapsed in under 24 hours. The house in the good school district, gone before an offer was ever made. The company he'd spent a decade building never got handed to Renee. Instead, it got handed to outside investigators combing through every transfer with his name attached to it. I hired an attorney of my own that same week, a woman named Patricia Alvarez who came recommended by a friend from church who'd gone through her own difficult divorce 2 years earlier. I brought Patricia everything. The financial statements, the credit card records, the photographs, the timeline, all of it organized in a folder I'd built with the same precision I used to reconcile client accounts. You did the hard part already, Patricia told me during our first meeting. Most people come to me with suspicion. You came to me with evidence. The divorce filing moved faster than I ever expected, mostly because Marcus had almost no ground left to stand on. Between the documented affair, the corporate misconduct investigation hanging over his career, and 2 years of financial records showing exactly where our joint money had gone, there wasn't much room for him to negotiate from. Patricia made sure the settlement reflected that. Half of everything, including retirement accounts, he'd apparently hoped I wouldn't think to ask about. The house, fully mine, the one he'd been quietly planning to walk away from anyway. Renee, from what I later heard through people who still worked at Bramwell, resigned before the investigation could formally conclude. Marcus resigned not long after her, once it became clear the board no longer had confidence in him and the reputational damage had already spread through every corner of the industry he'd spent 20 years building a name in. I moved through those months quietly. Not with rage, though I'd earned the right to plenty of it. Something steadier than that. I sold the house we'd shared for 2 decades and bought a smaller place close to my daughter, with a garden I finally had time to actually tend instead of just admiring from a kitchen window between errands. I still work at Holloway and Voss. Still a senior accountant, still the same stable, unglamorous job Marcus used to gently tease me for never wanting to leave. Except now I understand something I didn't understand 22 years ago. Stability was never something I needed him to validate. It was the thing that let me walk into that lobby holding a paper deli bag, hear a stranger call another woman my husband's wife, and instead of falling apart on the spot, quietly, methodically, take my life back one document at a time. People ask me sometimes if I regret going through his laptop that night, if I regret walking into that apartment uninvited, if some part of me wishes I'd never picked up that silver key. I don't. Because the version of me who almost didn't look, who almost let the guard's comment slide as some harmless mix-up, that version of me would still be setting the table for a man who'd already picked out someone else's future. I kept one thing from that whole ordeal, tucked away in a drawer I rarely open anymore. The tickets to that Broadway show I'd bought as an anniversary surprise, the ones I never got to give him. I used them myself 6 months later, sitting in a theater beside my daughter instead, watching a story about people who lose everything and somehow still find their way to something worth having. Because that's the thing nobody tells you about discovering the truth. It doesn't just take something from you. Eventually, if you let it, it hands something back. If this story meant something to you, if you've ever had to quietly rebuild your life out of pieces someone else tried to rearrange without asking, I want you to know you're not alone in this. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Subscribe if you want more stories like this one, because there are so many more women out there who found their clarity the same way I did, one quiet decision at a time. And if you made it all the way to the end of this one, thank you for sitting with me through it. I'll see you in the next story.